Welcome to the Savvy Luminary podcast, Astrology for Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Leslie Tagorda, creator of the Astrobrand Method, business astrologer, brand designer, author, and Aquarius boss woman. I help visionary spiritual entrepreneurs and impact makers like you illuminate and amplify your unique star powers so you can be the luminary you were born to be. Luminaries, I am beyond excited to bring you one of my most powerful clients that I've ever had the honor to witness and to work with, Tihanna Louise McCleese. She has an amazing story and just this incredibly powerful chart with her Libra Sun in the 12th house, her Gemini Moon in the 9th house, and her Libra Rising with Pluto right on the ascendant. To say that she's a powerhouse, it can't even capture just the intensity and just the pure drive and the distillation that her life is all about. And she teaches leaders and executives how to become more authentic, to really become the biggest, most visible versions of herself. She's going to be sharing with her journey. But before we go into that journey, Tihanna, with that introduction, if there's one thing that people could take away from just experiencing you or having a first impression of you, what would you want that to be?
Well, I tell my clients all the time, the experience with me is this. I live my life as a very connected, loving, and trusting leader.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I am here to support you in doing the work. And we all have to do our work. And what we all know about work is it doesn't always feel good.
Yeah.
And so I am that coach who's not just here to champion you, but to also make sure that you fly. And just like any mother bird, I will pluck you out of the nest and I will give you a big, big hug so that you know you're loved. Then I'll push you off the bridge. And that's really, the experience. The other thing I would say is I very much work with myself around taking my own mask off each and every day, sometimes moment to moment. And so that's really what the work with me is about, because that's what communication is about. Communication is one of our most intimate forms of connection. Yeah. And whether you are talking about your company's earnings or having, a town hall meeting or all hands meeting or speaking one-to-one with your leadership.
Yeah.
Today, people are really listening, not just for what it is but who you are.
Yes.
And in order to share who you are, you gotta...
The mask comes off. Yeah,
the mask comes off. And I mean, look at some of the things that have happened in the world today, that we look to corporations and political leaders and whatnot to figure out and have something valuable to add to the conversation. And most of the time, what's missing is their own humanity, their own authenticity, their own ability to say what it is they would say if the mics weren't on. And so my job is to have you be able to say what you would say, whether the mics were on or not.
Yeah, you have this just innate ability to, like you said, from your journalism and broadcasting career, to find the story and to strip away everything else and amplify that story, because that everybody has these pieces of their story, these vulnerable pieces that sometimes feel like really painful and very vulnerable to share. But that's what connects people to us, is when we can share that deepest parts of us.
And, I'm going to tell you this, you're so right. And it's part of the reason, because for a long time, I actually started to shy away from the executive coaching and whatnot. And that's how my business kind of got, muddled down into some of the more spiritual aspects. 'Cause I was like, I just
Not
want to
muddled
do
down.
something. Not
Lift it
brought
up.
down, but yeah, like
Yeah.
more like I was shunning this other like professional side.
Hiding it,
So I was
putting it
like,
in the closet.
I was like putting it in the closet. I'm like, I just want to focus on like doing the heart work, the spiritual work,
Yeah.
awakening, that kind of thing. But then I realized, I'm like, where do most people, regardless of what they call themselves, a light worker, a coach, whatever,
Mhm.
where do they spend most of their day? Well, most people who I work with, they spend most of their day, as much as they love to be spending all of their time with their family and friends, they're spending most of their day in their workplace, whether that be a corporate job that they work for someone else or their own business.
Mhm.
And then I started thinking, oh my God, who runs this country? What we call corporations.
Yeah.
And what are corporations? Nothing more than letters written on a piece of paper that we call legal documents. Corporations are people.
Run by people.
They are collectives of people with hopefully a shared goal, mission, and core set of values.
Yeah.
And so when we look at, making change and whatnot, and as someone who covered, some of the earliest Black Lives Matter movements and, all of these different protests, Occupy Oakland, Occupy Wall Street, all of that, I'm like, if we could actually have influence and impact over the minds and hearts and souls of
Mhm.
people inside of these corporations, that's how change occurs. See,
Ah.
if I can support you in changing you, Leslie, then I don't need to change the way you think. I don't need to
Mhm.
change what you do, because by nature of you changing your own beingness, your own consciousness, you're going to make better decisions.
Yes.
You're going to make better choices.
Well, I'm so delighted that you're working with people in corporate. Like for me, I mostly work with individuals and small business owners, but we have to face the truth that there's corporations really run our country, most countries, and they have so much influence and political and financial power. But from my perspective, most of those executives that are running those corporations, they don't always have what's best for the majority. And why is it that some people at those tops of those corporations are making decisions that are really hurtful? And my guess is only because that they too hurt and are not coming face to face with these deep demons, even though they appear successful. And you're doing that purification work of getting to the hearts and souls of executive leaders so that change, really like good change, can really happen.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many leaders I've worked with who, in front of folks would never admit, but behind closed doors with me would admit to their level of insecurity,
Mm.
their level of feeling like they need to conform,
Mhm.
their level of not even having an awareness that, whoa, these things from my past are really driving a lot of the things that I do today. I don't even think about these things anymore.
Mhm.
Whoa, thinking about these things could be like game changing for me. And actually, I do want to think about these things.
Yeah. I mean, you're such the perfect example of being present to and giving recognition to painful past experiences. I want to share the story of the here and now, but you have a past experience where you've had these like amazing stories that people would kind of want to hide and not share, but you're like, no, this is my authentic self, this is my truth, this is my power, listen to this story. Would you mind sharing some of your journey, like some of these like kind of milestones in your journey that have kind of created the powerhouse that Tihanna Louise is?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the biggest story for me that comes up, and if there's any more, definitely feel free to call them out. I tell people authenticity is key, right?
Yeah.
And to be authentic, you would have to first be fully accepting of yourself. And for a long time, when I was in corporate America, one of the things that I wanted to hide most was the fact that the first 2 years of my adult life I spent in federal prison. You know, I had been
Yeah.
in a very, what I would call abusive teenage relationship, my first relationship, and it led to me doing some things that I thought I should do to have what I needed to have, and that landed me in jail. The beautiful thing about it is, had I never ever gone to federal prison, spent those first, few years of my life, like 18 to 21,
Mm-hmm.
there, I probably would have never landed on television, on TV, on the ABCs, on the CBSs, the Fox. But when I got there, no one had that story.
Yeah.
And I spent so much time trying to cover that part of myself up, trying to hide that part of myself, trying to do what I needed to do to look right, sound right, act right, be
Mhm.
right. I wasn't Ivy League trained. I didn't go, I went to great schools. I didn't
Mhm.
go to the Ivy Leagues, and I was a great student, but I wasn't necessarily top of my class and things like that. And then, you know, all of these other things happened. The world changed,
Yeah.
reality TV sets in. Then, like, these kinds of stories become quote unquote cool. Like, we're
Yeah.
celebrating people who are doing
Yeah.
these kinds of things. And what that really showed me was how much time and energy I wasted in trying to
Mhm.
be something that I was not. No wonder it didn't work. No wonder it didn't feel good. When I share these kinds of stories with my clients, it's a aha for them. It's like, no wonder, no matter how many times I do this thing over and over and over again, it doesn't feel good. And it's like, yeah, because you can't even really be with the process because it's not you that's being with it. It's this
Yeah.
you that you've created.
What was it like when you finally revealed in your career, when you finally shared the story about your early teenage years, your early adulthood years? What did it feel like for you?
It was so freeing. It
Yeah.
was, it was cathartic. That's the
Mhm.
best way I could describe it. Cathartic, cleansing, freeing, like taking your hair out of a really tight a bun after
Mhm.
having it up all night. Being able to scratch your scalp for the first time after you take those braids out.
Mhm.
Um, like waking up from a deep slumber and really getting back to who Tihanna really is, because it's actually everything I learned, like, you know, growing up the way that I grew up in deep East Oakland
Mhm.
and in some very urban parts of St. Louis, Missouri, and having some of the experiences that I had. It's actually what made me a great reporter.
Yes.
Like
Fearless.
when people needed to get that interview with the person that, probably was not going to talk to you because of what they thought of you, I was the person who could get the interview because I could speak many different languages.
Yeah.
I had a very unassuming demeanor, right? I
Mhm.
could fit in wherever I was in the, highest echelons of society, quote unquote, to the lowest.
Yeah.
Um,
That shape shifting.
Shape shifting. Yeah. And so then it was also like enlightening of
Yeah.
this thing that I had been trying to cover up was such a great skill. Like I became the go-to person, like whenever they needed someone, like that's how I became a breaking news reporter. Because breaking news normally, something's happening that people don't want to talk about. They're
Yeah.
trying to cover up for whatever reason, whether it's crime, whether it's politics or whatnot.
Yeah.
I was that person who had the communication skills to get the interviews, to get into the doors, to get what needed to be done,
To
right? Done.
reveal the truth, like
To
with,
reveal the truth.
yeah, that Pluto aspect on, even though it's in Libra, there's this revelation. It's still doing it in this very approachable and peaceful way, like diplomatic way, but it's like having this Scorpio energy of just like, okay, we're going to peel back the band-aid, like we have to do this, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to get all of the, we're going to clear this all out. So one of my questions in asking this, what I wanted to reveal about you coming out and sharing like this deep part of your experience of being in federal prison as like a young adult is that you held it back, but when you finally let it go, not only was it freeing, but it was expansive and actually opened up all of these doors of opportunity that were just waiting. And so other people who are, maybe sitting on some like smaller parts of themselves that feel like very scary or don't want to be shared, just like, looking to you, Tihanna, and what ended up happening and how beautifully it evolved for you.
Yeah, I tell my children all the time. I have 4 children, by the way. The oldest is 21, the youngest is 8. And I tell all of them, prison is the best thing that happened for me. I pray that, that's not what needs to happen to you for you to get onto your path, but it was the best path for me, right?
Yeah.
It grounded me back into who I really am. It re-clarified what was really important to me and defined where I wanted to go. Because before that happened to me, I wasn't really clear about what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be, who I needed to be. Like once all of that happened to me, I was like, oh yeah, I'm clear about who I am, where I'm going, and what I need to do to get there. Went out of prison, went to college, graduated from college, top honors, never looked back, went on to do news, was promoted from my first news job in 6 months from production assistant to news producer, and just went on, never looked back.
So
Yeah.
what do you think were the tools that got you from once you were released from prison but you have this particular, like this model, even, I'll share the story of how we came to today's recording session and how we almost rescheduled it. But even when you were sharing with me, just this really mindful practice of positive intention setting and energy. And I suspect that really pulled you through.
So I've always, when I say I've been a deep diver, what I really mean by that is I've experienced a lot of pain in my life. I was born into pain. My parents they had a lot of issues.
Yeah.
And so I've never been a person who ran from pain. I actually ran toward it, which is how I became, like this, I don't know, I guess you could call it like child healer or something, child comfort to adults in my family who are in a lot of pain. So one thing that has been a common thread throughout my life when I look back has been this idea of transformation, transmutation, versus looking to avoid, run away, stuff down, hide. I'm the person who's going to go through the drama, the trauma, figure it out, and then come out on the other side of it, healed, cleansed, like, oh, like I learned something with the lesson on the other side. Now, that being said, it's definitely meant, it doesn't always look good.
No, or feel good.
Or feel good. But there's a lot of value in living life that way. And so there was nothing different about when I found myself in prison. Actually, when I found myself in prison, what I reconnected to was my love of reading. So I found my place of peace in the prison library. That was like the only place on the whole grounds where you could have some alone time. No one would be there.
Oh my gosh, your Gemini Moon, just needing to be fed and be curious.
And figure out how the hell I got there.
Yeah.
Like I knew what I had done, but I was just like, whoa, this is so different than, who I had started life out as.
Yeah.
And one thing that my mom always did, she always kept ebony magazines, Essence magazines, in Newsweek, Time, Life. My brother was really big, Rolling Stone. He was a big music person. He was big into magazines and stuff. So I always had this love of reading. Okay. And so I connected back to that. And in the prison library, there were a lot of books about transformation and turning one's life around. And it reminded me of, like articles I would read in Essence. And so it was like a reawakening, so to speak, a coming back home to self and a deep reminder of who I really was at my core and at my soul level. And trust me, I was not this, like a criminal or like person
Yeah.
trying to manipulate society or whatnot. That's just not who I was.
No.
And I recognized that how I had gotten onto that path of becoming that was by not dealing with a lot of pain, right? That's how I had, a lot of pain and demons, things that I would have just rather forgotten
Yeah.
about, my father and family life and
Yeah.
disappointments and things like that. And so I spent the 2.5 years in jail, really coming to grips with that, really working on that and really accepting that.
Yeah.
And so when I came out, I was free of all of that baggage.
Oh, so I find this, it's like so striking because it's like that experience is directly related to the work that you're doing now for clients. It's this, in essence, you're having them come face to face with their past experiences, their past hurts, those parts of themselves that they might be hiding, so that you can really release them and bring them to light. And they start, all of a sudden they open up to highest expressions of themselves so that they can be more visible, more like more of their own authority.
Yeah, and the way that we approach it is really developing a practice of transmutation, of cleansing, of distilling
Yeah.
down and really reconnecting to oneself. Because the other thing that I realized is, that was one thing, when I was 18, that was one thing that I needed to get through life in order to move forward. Well, I got married, I had kids, I formed a career. As you can imagine, there were many more challenges that
Yeah.
presented themselves. Sure, I wasn't in prison, but I found myself trapped inside of my own emotional prison, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because of
Responsibilities.
because of responsibilities and relationships that weren't quite right and jobs that weren't quite right and all of that. And so really what I learned is, and this is what I help people with now, is developing this practice of doing exactly what you talked about. And sure, some of it is based in like positive thinking and whatnot, but it's really more rooted in this deep connection with self, AKA what I would call source.
Yes.
And having that be the root to everything. And when that is your base, when that is your come from, it's like anything can be thrown at you, anything can happen. And that's what I was sharing in the email discussion today about, well, could I do this? Could I not? And it was like, sure, I could have not done this and
Yeah.
gone and processed. But that's not really where I wanted to be. I really wanted to be here with you doing that. And that's where the value was for me today. But in
Yeah.
order to do that, I had to be willing to accept everything else that came. Like after I sent that email to you, my freaking ceiling started leaking.
Oh no.
My Wi-Fi wouldn't work. And I'm just like, oh, my world is collapsing and leaking at the same time. You know what I mean? And
Oh
so
my
what did I
goodness.
come back to? Well, I definitely could not come back to all of the things that I've created around me externally to lean into. The only thing that I could come back to as my world seemed to be falling apart is everything that's in here.
Yeah.
And this is something that, you can't really explain it. You can't really define it. We don't have the language. But when you tune into it and when you connect to it, it can never be taken away from you.
Yeah, that's that power of that Pluto on your ascendant and that's that Scorpio on your second house. That I call that place just our it's this your deep inner power. And it's sometimes I always tell my clients to not use words like empowerment or power, but when we're talking about Scorpio and that unexplainable sense, that truth, that power, it is that essence.
Yeah.
And you have fully tapped into it and it shows up beautifully. um so one of the reasons why, besides sharing Tihanna's story, I wanted to bring Tihanna on because we worked very in depth, doing an Astro Brand intensive where we met 4 times and we put together a comprehensive brand book that she was then able to share with her team, her copywriters, her social media marketers, her website designers, just like everything. Could you share a little bit about that experience and how that has helped you clarify?
Yeah, it's really taken something that's intangible and that I can put a lot of words around and made it very tangible and concrete that someone could actually look at and say, oh, okay, like I really get this. Right. You know, when we came together, sure, I had a good sense of, what I do and who I serve and why and whatnot. But when it came to talking about like the process of all of that and how it connects to communication and speaking and leadership and, like the woo-woo-ness of it
Mhm.
all, no one had been able to just clearly help me articulate it the way that you did and then put it into this what became a 53-page brand book. And that really meant something to me because I had no idea of what the actual product would look like, but it just turned into this living, breathing document that I could just, hand off to someone versus having conversation after conversation. And
Yeah.
particularly with people, I work with a lot of contractors and things like that. And not everyone has the same level of awareness around astrology and
Mhm.
spirituality and things like that. And so the test has been giving it to them, those kinds of people, and then being like, oh my God, I totally get this.
Wow.
And then I'm a big believer in numbers as well. And so the fact that it was the number of pages that it was, I was just like, oh, this was meant to be. More importantly, even if the book wouldn't have come out of it, which the book has just been amazing, those 4 sessions that we spent, which were about 2 hours each, something like
About
that.
an hour and a half or so, yeah.
Yeah, I think we kind of stretched it or something
Yeah.
like that.
It's hard
um,
not to.
it got me not just thinking about my brand, but sometimes when you're like so invested in building a business, it's it's like easy to have like this tunnel vision because you're like so deep into it. It like helped me pull out of it and not just reminded me of like my why, but it gave me like this new lens of like who I am in it
Mhm.
and why it is what it is. So it kind of like broadened my vision, right? It gave me this deeper clarity and it also reconnected me to the why of why I need to be doing this at a corporate level, not just an individual level. Because I think I shared with you in one of our sessions that, communication is at the heart of everything.
Yeah.
If if you or any of your listeners right now think about any war or global conflict that has been created,
So
it was all
many.
created as a result of a breakdown in talks, a breakdown in communication. If you think about any relationship that failed that you've had personally,
Mhm.
guarantee a lack of communication was at the center of it.
Yeah.
And so, knowing that that was so important to me and then connecting that to like my chart and like why that is such a, a not just the thing that I'm passionate about and important to, but it's almost like this mandate on my life just for me to function. Like,
Mhm.
right, just for me personally, communication is something that I have to have,
Yeah.
healthy communication that I have to have in order to be in relationship with other people. And it's like, oh my God, it makes total sense. So there was like this realignment with just the essence of what I do. And then being able to have that in this, again, this book form, this document form, and being able to share that with other people and them really getting my vision without me having to try and articulate that in so many ways has been a true blessing. And it's really just, catapulted me like in the time that we've met. Not only have I gotten a lot of things done, I've really started to attract more of my tribe and people who are aligned with what it is that I do. And that's in part because I'm just more able to clearly communicate.
Yeah, you're able to confidently express the brilliance of you, and that makes you just so attractive to the people you're meant to serve.
Unapologetically.
It's amazing to see what you've done with the brand book, because so in the brand book, basically what my team and I have done is that we've taken our 4 sessions together where we cover the what of the brand, the why of the brand, the leadership and the how of the brand, the presentation of the brand values, brand promise, your ultimate mission and purpose, and even your signature systems, plus some suggested like colors and symbols to work within your brand. And you just ran with it. I know we connected you to a brand photographer and to a copywriter, and I know you had a designer and you had your social media people, and like just you have to go look at Tihanna's website, tihannalouise.com, and I'll put up the links in the show notes, because what you've taken from that and just how you've grown with it is like so perfectly aligned. And it's so wonderful to have that kind of comprehensive guide that says, hey, this is the imprint of my energy.
Yeah.
Please take it forth.
Yeah. And I mean, just in me saying that, it's like, yeah, I really was able to take that and do what I needed to do, which was build a team. And so I've built a team, which has made things so much easier. I've gotten
Yes.
a lot of good feedback and a lot of praise. Like, people have complimented me, like, when I say, hey, here's my brand book, like, you don't have to overthink this. They're like, oh my God, thank you. Like, whoa, this makes it so much easier. And, it was more like push and play. If anything, there was more like, oh, well, this gives me an idea about this. Maybe we can tweak this, versus always feeling like you have to start from the beginning, which as an entrepreneur, and let's just be honest, most of us are solopreneurs, it can feel so daunting and just challenging to constantly have to re-explain, recreate over and over and over again. And sometimes you already have a brand. Like, it's not like I had nothing when I came to you, but this just, it took it to a new level. It solidified it in a concrete way that there will be no more like, scrapping and starting over. It'll just be a build.
Evolution. Yeah.
An evolution, exactly.
It's so wonderful. I get really, really excited, and I haven't really talked about this brand, Astro Brand Intensive, that I've been doing. So you sharing your story, this is kind of the announcement for the Astro Brand Intensive. But it positions a business and just gives you the tool. Like it's an investment in the beginning, but it just makes everything so much, not effortless, but so much easier and in flow going later.
It does. And it made it a lot easier for me to be able to work with a copywriter, because as someone in journalism and whatnot, I have a lot of things to say about my own, the way people talk about my brand and things like that. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, it doesn't matter if you're into astrology or not.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that connects you to this thing that you're calling your business, your brand. And if you knew exactly how to talk about it, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation. But when you start exploring your astrology and really learning more about what the stars have to tell you about you, it just makes it so much more like crystal clear and concrete about what it is you need to say versus what you need to leave out, what is important, what isn't important. It just makes like who you need to serve, who you don't need to serve. It just makes it all so much clearer. And I don't know. I mean, for me, it was just like kind of, peeling back like any kind of film or layers that I had put onto it with my own thinking and questioning and believing.
All the things that other experts tell us that we need to talk about or should talk about. It's just like there's no copying, there's no guessing involved, and it's like very, very specific and unique to you. Oh, thank you. like Tihanna, I'm just so delighted that you were able to make this time, because I know you've been going through a lot in your personal life. And I can see that just with, we're recording this the day after the Libra new moon, during the Mercury retrograde. Yesterday, Pluto stationed direct, and, all of that energy activating all of Tihanna's Libra natal energies and her that the ascendant. And earlier when we were talking about like reviewing, you're really reviewing who you are right now. And in this process of I've been telling my other Libra rising clients with the same similar energy that you're kind of like molting right now. You're shedding this old part of you, and it feels a little bit raw right now, but it's such this wonderful space. So thank you for sharing your story.
No, I totally appreciate that. I hope me sharing my story helps someone else in some way, particularly someone else who may have similar astrology as me. And at the same time, just grounding into what I've come to accept as this practice of daily living, which for me has often looked like this reviewing and shedding and releasing and renewing, right?
Yeah.
Just to do it all over again.
It's just that's your process. That is your process. It's like radiance, truth, connection, communication.
Yeah. And start all over.
Start all over again. How can people find out more about you or work with you? Tell us all the things.
Yeah. So, I say the best thing to do is to get into communication with me. And the way you can do that is by number one, reaching out to me. You can connect with me through my website, tihannalouise.com. I have a beautiful new energy management tool, actually energy management products that I'm rolling out that you can find out more when you go to my website. I have this 4-part audio series, which just really delves deep into who we are as communicators, why we communicate the way that we do, and then how to manage the energy of our speaking and our communication. So that's one way if you're just looking to kind of figure out, well, what is this thing she's talking about, changing your thinking to change your speaking. That's one way to do that. You can also connect with me on social media. On social media is so like not my thing, but I'm at Tihanna Louise on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I am at T Louise Speaks on Twitter, although I don't really hang out there too much. But if you do Tihanna Louise on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, you'll find me. And then, just always send me a shout out at hello@tihannalouise.com. If you're thinking that, working with me is something that you might want to do, I always say, let's have a conversation. And you can book a session, an exploratory session with me through my website, tihannalouise.com. And yeah, we're out here. We're doing the things. I have things on my website. I'm putting out a book that I'll be sending along. It's an ebook. And then shortly after that, February of next year, I'm releasing like a physical book to talk more about this idea of just being more of ourselves everywhere, especially at the place where we spend most of our time, this thing we call work.
It's so beautiful. I'll have all of the links to Tihanna's website and her offers and her social media on the show notes for the Savvy Luminaries. So you don't have to worry about finding and spelling. But if you are already online, Tihanna is Tihanna Louise, LOUISE.com.
Yeah, and I also forgot to say I still do tarot and oracle card readings, and that's something that you can also find out about on my website and get a bunch of yummy, juicy resources, because I always say, like coaches are coaches, and we're gonna, talk to you about our sessions and whatnot. But my first coach was a book. And I always say, before there were coaches, there were books. Self-coaching, I'm really big on. So also on my website, you'll find a library that I call Worth a Read. And there's a ton of books on there that have really helped me, that I think can be of assistance to anybody on the planet, no matter what they're going through. So if you're into books, check those out as well.
Oh my gosh, Tihanna, I'm so glad that you kept that Worth a Read. Now it's your library. It's so amazing.
Yeah. So for the backstory is, Worth a Read was my original company until I worked with Leslie, and she was like, I really think you are your brand. And I was like, you know what? She's like, yeah, you're like Libra Sun, and she connected all these astrological things, and I was like, well, I always didn't want to be the brand. And so that was another thing that came out of our work together. A big thing, I would say.
Yeah, I love everything that you've created. Congratulations, Tihanna.
Thank you.
Thank you for making this time to spend with us, because I know it wasn't the most opportune, but I hope that you have received as much as you have given us.
Indeed.
Beautiful. All right, luminaries. Until next time, check out Tihanna's website and connect with her, please.
Bye.
Bye. If you love this podcast, please consider doing me a favor and heading over to Apple iTunes and leaving me a rating and review. Your rating and review helps this humble podcast get seen and found by more listeners like you. Please share the love.